you recently did an interview with Matt Duss, who was a foreign policy advisor, I believe, to Bernie Sanders, and it was mostly about the Ukraine. And maybe we can put the Parmoya Jayapal. Uh, don't you think sometimes you are being a bit too lenient on these people? Because it does feel like, especially with the separation of the Build Back Better and the infrastructure bill, or with Matt Duss writing that article about Ukraine, I don't know who was the target of that article, except potential like future employers, to be honest. Like does left has any power in that? Like who's on the left that is stopping Ukraine being helped even more? So I just feel like, do you feel like sometimes perhaps media is too lenient? Because genuinely, like, people on the left tend to be, they don't want to be very mean. I feel like they're nicer people. So it's just, I don't know.
Well, it's a great question, Sam, because, and for me personally, it involves multiple issues, right? One of the issues is tactical. One of them is just personality, okay? Because I've brawled with people on left and right. I've been on Tucker Carlson's show. I've been on, but this was many years ago. I've been on Sean Hannity's show and so on. I vowed I would never do it again, just not because I didn't do reasonably well or very well, but because I just didn't like the feeling, and I'm kind of, I don't like the adrenaline that sticks with you for 48 hours or, but also I'm, a nice guy. But the Matt Duss thing was interesting to me because it was a lot of things were going on in my head. The other thing is, I've had Matt Taibbi on. Now, I didn't know Matt Duss before. Matt Taibbi, who you probably know, really well-known writer, was very good on the financial stuff. Is a good friend of mine, but sometimes kind of takes positions on cancel culture and things so-called that people think are pretty neoconservative and so on. I debated him. I had him on the show. We had a debate about the leftist philosopher Herbert Marcuse.
Oh yes, the Marcuse one. We've seen that one. I was going to put a question about Marcuse, but then it became too much. So
yeah, and I think I was too nice to Taibbi too, and I think he acknowledged.
Maybe, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I think that's just my personality. But with the Matt Duss thing, it's interesting. I have been phenomenally disappointed with Bernie, with the entire left, all of them, the squad, every single progressive in Congress, with no exception that I can think of, about Ukraine and about foreign policy. I think while they've been pretty good on Yemen, on calling for disengagement with the Saudi, our role in the, excuse me, I'm going to kill that damn ant. Enough is enough. With disengagement with our role, our complicity in the Saudi atrocities in Yemen, they've gone along with our in my view our role in egging on the Ukrainians as sacrificial lambs to our desire to weaken the Russians militarily. By when Zelensky, when that war, I don't want to get on a huge sidetrack, but when that war began, Zelensky asked for a negotiating ability and military aid. Well, we were more than happy to give him military aid. We imposed these sanctions. It gave Zelensky no ability to negotiate over the sanctions. So finally, he stopped asking for negotiations. He just said, okay, give me all the military aid I can get. And by the way, I'm the only one commenting on that who literally qualifies for Ukrainian citizenship because really? My grandparents were born in Ukraine. But not a single, and there are a lot of really smart people. I've had them on my show, some of them talking about how we need a more balanced and measured approach in the U.S. that emphasizes negotiations because Ukraine is not going to overthrow Putin. Ukraine is not going to military conquer Russia. It's going to end in negotiation one way or another. There's questions how many deaths in between. Not a single progressive in Congress has stood up on this, including Bernie. And then, as you said, Matt Duss wrote a piece that Bernie's foreign policy advisor that seemed to be more like a job application than a serious piece on what to do about Ukraine. So I went through this thought process and said, well, I started to sit down and really eviscerate him in print. And then I thought, well, we're both Bernie people. We're kind of, comrades and Team Bernie. Maybe I'll have him on the show first. And it was like I had him on the show, and I thought, well, he's like a nice, in Yiddish they say nebbishy, guy, meaning, sort of, he's not like, he's like academic, bookish, and I thought,
it felt like just he was saying that let's just be, more reasonable or something along, like it felt like a nothing burger, his argument on. I hope I'm
right. And every time I said, but don't you think we should blah, blah, blah? He's like, yes, we should do that too. It's like,
yeah, exactly.
Okay. All right. Well, we disagree. Okay. You agree with what I say. I don't agree with what you say. Okay. But, should I have been tougher on him? I was like, maybe. It's like, maybe I should have been tougher. Ben Burgess is a philosopher. He's a friend of mine. He writes for Jacobin a lot. And he actually did a 2-hour program about my 1-hour debate with Matt Taibbi about Herbert Marcuse. Ben had other philosophers on it.
Yes, I remember that last year.
So I went on with Ben to talk about it. And I was like, man, I'm not a philosopher. I don't have a PhD in philosophy. That was not the point. But there were a couple points I could have crushed Taibbi on that. On that was anti-Semitic, and I didn't, right? I kind of hinted at it, and he knew where I was going, and I was like, but I'll let you go. And but I'm just not that guy, right? I'm not Bill Maher. I'm not Tucker Carlson. I'm not Sean Hannity. It's just like.
Well, would you like to take a chance now to? What was the stuff about Marcuse? We did a small series about Frankfurt School on YouTube. So
you guys did?
Yeah. It's still ongoing. I think we have 2 episodes more to broadcast. But yeah, what was I don't know. It was, do you anything especially remember that you wanted to say? Maybe you missed or.
And I mean, just one thing that I remember is that Matt's approach was that he went off one book, I believe, The Critique of Tolerance, one of his viewers had suggested, and he kind of went for that book, but he made very general statements about Marcuse, if I remember correctly. So I remember some of those you were already kind of having issues with it, the way he had framed it.
Well, it was more, where I went easy with him was more about Marcuse's identity. As an immigrant
thing and everything.
Right, like you said, I'll bet he never went to a baseball game, cracked open a bottle or a can of
beer,
black label beer and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, really? And so he wasn't really American in that sense. I was like, really, man, most Jewish immigrants to the United States, I'm going to guess, never went to a Pittsburgh Phillies game and cracked. Are you suggesting that Jewish immigrants aren't really American? Because I wouldn't go there, okay? Because that kind of sounds anti-Semitic, brother. It kind of sounds like, wow, okay.
Like Native Americans probably didn't, I would imagine.
Right, I would imagine they're not out there in North Dakota or Wyoming.
Baseball,
Right. But he knew what I was saying. In fact, he said, I shouldn't have wrote that, which is okay, once somebody says I shouldn't have wrote that, okay, we made the point. But look, in terms of Marcuse in general, he's a fascinating case of a brilliant thinker, kind of, in my view, embedded in amber in terms of, he's in the amber of his time. His moment, his cultural and historical moment. That's how I view him. His emphasis on the non-economic, non-political, the cultural, sexual, etc. I could say it doesn't age well, and I kind of be right, but it's not so much that it doesn't age well, is that it almost like an artifact. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yes. I mean, I think if I'm trying to say, if I understand you correctly, everyone in a way is a product of their time or very much influenced by their time, but him, it was just so specific and period, everything that happened to him from when he left Germany and then the post-War II situation,
First
how unique
German
that
Revolution.
was and all this. So I think that's what you're trying to say, right? I mean, the moments were just so big during that time, it just influenced them perhaps than other people are influenced by their moment and their surroundings.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think one of my great takeaways, not that I'm a Marcuse expert by any means, but one of my great takeaways about Marcuse is less what he thinks than how he thinks. The way that he synthesizes his moment, to me, is of greater interest at times than specifically the product of that synthesis process. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, actually, I would even like Marcuse, both, I mean, all the Frankfurt school, I think, but Marcuse especially, he's much better than his followers, I think. His followers are like, I don't like, they seem much more hardcore and extremist than he was, I feel.
I think that's right, because I think that dovetails with what I'm saying, because I think there was a fluidity about his thinking and there's a rigidity to his followers. And I think what I'm admiring is his fluidity, and what you're rejecting, and I also reject, is the rigidity.